A hole suddenly appeared in the man's ear, bleeding. It wasn't until his comrade pointed it out that he realized with a start. This was the aftershock from the sun god Apollo using his most powerful divine technique. The speed was so fast that the person hit was completely unaware. And the reason the sun god Apollo had to unleash his ultimate technique was because his opponent was the warrior known as the strongest of mankind. The Spartan king Leonidas died to prepare for the upcoming 9th Great War between gods and men. Brunhild and the others sought out the almighty god, who was none other than the sun god Apollo. But this guy, right from his appearance, had a style that was a bit unusual. He was seen rushing towards the war god Ars, wanting to land a punch, which scared Ars so much he scrambled out of the way, even shouting, "Hey, isn't this my best friend, Ars?" While Ars was there struggling for his life, his face seemed to say, "Somebody save me." In Greek mythology, Ars was the unlucky type who got beaten up every day, while Apollo was the type who loved to show off, shining brightly everywhere. This Apollo was not only handsome, but his train of thought was also incredibly strange. Ars, in utter misery, said that their side, the gods, had already lost 3 rounds. Poseidon, Heracles, and Hades were all gone. "You're a god, don't you feel any grief?" In response, Apollo, with an intoxicated expression and waving his hands, said, "Grief? Why should there be grief? They burned their souls for their beliefs and died on the battlefield. This is truly beautiful. This is the ultimate art." Listening to this, you'd wonder if he was even human. Oh wait, he really is a god. In Apollo's eyes, winning or losing didn't matter. What mattered was whether one died beautifully, to show the world the aesthetics of violence. This guy decided on the spot that he would enter the ring for the 9th round. Cut to the resting room of mankind's side. The current score was tied at 4-4. This 9th round was an extremely crucial turning point. The Valkyria Brunhild was worried sick, not knowing who to send into battle. She led her younger sister, Gel, to a room thick with cigar smoke. The person sitting inside was the man of legend, the leader of the 300 Spartan warriors, King Leonidas. But his current appearance was a bit wild. He was leisurely lying there, smoking a cigar and reading a book, looking completely like a retired old cadre. As soon as Brunhild started to invite him to battle, the old man didn't even lift his head and refused outright. "Not going. Didn't I already say? Either let me fight the first round, or the final one to wrap things up. Scheduling me for this mediocre 9th round, who are you looking down on?" Brunhild, who understood the art of war, wasn't in a hurry. She just nonchalantly dropped a line, "Well, I didn't want to bother you either. It's just that the opposing god this time is a bit special. Besides you, no one can handle him. That god is the sun god, Apollo." At that moment, the air seemed to freeze. A second ago, he was pretending to be calm, but as soon as Leonidas heard the 3 words Apollo, the veins on his bearded face immediately bulged. A terrifying killing intent shattered the surrounding furniture. This Leonidas had 3 great loves in his life. First, lying in a hammock reading. Second, drinking red wine with Spartan cheese. And third, personally punching the arrogant sun god Apollo's nose flat. If it's that narcissist, then I'll take this match. This battle was destined to be a clash of titans. On the Valkyries' side, they paired him with the 5th Valkyria, Gyril. This girl was also hot-tempered. The two started bickering the moment they met, mainly because neither would submit to the other. But this proved they were a perfect match to perform the Vulunder. Forging a transformable super shield, the atmosphere at the arena was hyped to the max. Looking at mankind's side, on the stands was the neat square formation of Sparta. Every one of them was an elite warrior, with muscles harder than rock, roaring wildly. Inside, Leonidas, carrying a large shield and with a cigar in his mouth, walked with an unrecognizable gait onto the stage. The commentator Handel screamed himself hoarse. "This is the strongest rebel in human history. The great King Leonidas, the first of Sparta." Looking to the other side, Apollo's entrance was pure light pollution. He brought his own spotlight effect and had to strike a few poses to enjoy the screams of his fans. From all over the arena, he was extremely confident in his looks. Looking at his opponent Leonidas, his eyes were filled with disdain. Ugh, so barbaric, so crude, not elegant at all. Just as the referee shouted begin, Apollo was still rambling on, saying something like, "If you want to talk to me, you must first kneel to show your submission." Before his template speech was even finished, Leonidas threw his shield straight at his face. Elegant my ass. The blow missed, but it left Apollo stunned. The god's side of the audience erupted. How dare this human have no martial virtue? Attacking before the speech is over. Leonidas spat out his cigar and sneered, "This is a battlefield. You think this is a live show? Once you're in the ring, it's life or death. This is the rule of Sparta." So, the question is, why did Leonidas hate Apollo so much? This hatred ran deeper than avenging a father. It had to be traced back to the famous Battle of Thermopylae. At that time, the Persian king Xerxes led an army of 300,000, closing in on a nearly doomed Greece. Leonidas, as the king of Sparta, immediately decided to lead his troops to defend the homeland. But at this critical moment, the conservative Spartan elders stepped in. They brought out a so-called divine oracle, saying that the god Apollo had decreed that it was currently the festival of Carnea, a day of worship for Apollo. During this time, no weapons were to be drawn. Otherwise it would be disrespectful to the god and they would be punished by the heavens. Leonidas at that moment burst out laughing. The enemy was at their doorstep, and these old men were still clinging to the rules of some raggedy festival. What divine oracle? What heavenly punishment? You are all a bunch of fools. He argued forcefully at the council. If we don't dispatch troops now, the destruction of Sparta is inevitable. Once you're all dead, what's the point of waiting for the festival to be over? In response, the elders just repeated like a machine, this is the rule, this is the tradition, this is the divine oracle of Lord Apollo. We must follow the will of the god. In that moment, Leonidas saw through it all. This wasn't the will of any god. This was just a group of old men in high positions, using the name of a deity to cover up their own cowardice and submission. This so-called divine oracle was a dog leash around the neck of humanity. If following the will of the god means the destruction of our nation and people, then I don't need to respect this god. At this time, the classic scene of the 300 warriors appeared. These 300 men knew full well that following their king meant marching to their deaths. They knew that defying the divine oracle could mean they wouldn't find peace in death. But they still charged forward without a hint of regret. Why? Because of the back of that man. It was the broadest, most resolute, and most righteous back among all men in the world. In the eyes of these gruff men, Apollo's divine oracle was worth less than this towering back of Leonidas, even if it meant going down to hell. As long as they followed this back, they would surely win glory for their nation. This was the soul of Sparta, a peak rebellion, for my fate is my own, not heaven's. The flashback ends, returning to the arena. Leonidas's mind was now filled with the nauseating memory of that divine oracle, coupled with the Apollo before him, with that condescending look, acting as if everything was in the palm of his provocative hand. He was truly the embodiment of that raggedy oracle from back then. New and old grudges combined, Leonidas completely exploded. There are only 3 things I hate most in this life. First, being ordered around by others. Second, being ordered around by others. And third, also being ordered around by others. Leonidas swung his super divine weapon, which could transform into the shield of truth, smashing it repeatedly into Apollo's face. The offensive was truly like an out-of-control bulldozer, each blow smashing the floor into a huge crater. But it must be admitted, a god is still a god, especially one of Apollo's rank. Facing Leonidas's destructive attack, Apollo's performance was, how to put it, as if he didn't give a damn. This guy was like he was dancing the cha-cha-cha, dodging left and right. His footwork so light it was like a passing breeze. Even Zeus from the sidelines had to exclaim, these are the footsteps of the god of boxing. Apollo, while dodging, kept trash-talking as if he was the top player on the server. To crude, to barbaric. This kind of attack that only relies on brute force is an insult to beauty. Leonidas on this side was panting from exhaustion, but in the end, he couldn't even touch the hem of his opponent's garment. If this were a normal person, their spirit would have been broken long ago. The human side of the audience was also getting anxious. Boss, don't let him lead you by the nose. Find a way to get close. At this moment, Apollo suddenly stopped. He looked at the panting Leonidas and made another astonishing move. He stretched out his finger and drew 2 lines on the arena floor, forcing the huge arena to shrink into a narrow path. I see you're tired from running. How about this? We just fight within this range. That way you can't say I'm bullying a short-legged guy. The captains exclaimed. What the hell is going on? This was truly an insult, like playing a game and your opponent says, I'm a challenger, so I'll give a bronze player a one-hand handicap. But the fan club on the god's side went wild. Oh my god, Lord Apollo is so cool, so confident. This is the magnanimity of the sun god. But actually, Apollo had a special passive skill called instinct to show off in a crowd. As long as the people around him praised him more and expectations grew higher, he would become stronger. This seemingly suicidal behavior was actually him buffing himself. He wanted to win in this seemingly impossible way to display beauty and create his own highlights. Leonidas saw this and his anger turned to contempt. Fine, if you want to die, I'll grant your wish in this confined space. Apollo's room for dodging was significantly compressed. Leonidas seized the opportunity. The divine weapon transformed into a giant hammer. This was his ultimate killing technique, the god-slaying hammer of Sparta. However, this earth-shattering blow was nimbly dodged by Apollo, who at the same time landed a strong punch to Leonidas's abdomen. Just as Leonidas was about to counterattack, he suddenly found he couldn't move. Looking back, he discovered that on the enemy's hands, without his knowing, a layer of sparkling bright threads had appeared, binding him tightly. It was the threads of Artemis. It turned out that during their earlier exchange, Apollo had taken the opportunity to wrap it around him. Leonidas gritted his teeth, wanting to break free, but the threads of light were incredibly durable. Not showing even a scratch dot at this time, Apollo's fists were wrapped in the threads of Artemis. He threw a punch that landed squarely on his opponent's face, accompanied by a loud, violent explosion. Everyone thought it was over. Apollo had already started giving his victor's speech. See? No matter how strong you struggle, in the end, you still have to look up at the sun, which is me. That is the fate of mortals. Now, kneel and submit before me. But he didn't expect that the 2 words kneel down simply didn't exist in the Spartan dictionary. The Spartan warriors in the stands exploded. The man who was once surrounded by an army of 300,000 had never once bent his knees. The man who once gave the middle finger to a divine oracle. How could he kneel so easily? At the very moment Apollo thought he had victory in his grasp, Leonidas made a move that defied the laws of physics. Though his hands were bound, he still had his head. Get down for me. Leonidas used all his strength to deliver a violent headbutt, smashing it straight into Apollo's handsome face. Then Leonidas raised his war hammer with all his might and brought it down, smashing Apollo to the ground. In that moment, the world fell silent. Leonidas, though his face was covered in blood, still stood as tall as a tower. He looked down from above at Apollo, who was lying face down on the ground with a dazed expression, and let out a hearty laugh. See clearly this time? Who did you want to kneel? The one kneeling on the ground now is you damn god. At this moment, the arena was in a complete uproar. The defeated Spartan men in the stands were roaring wildly, Sparta, Sparta. The atmosphere was as if the one standing on the stage now was not a person, but an insurmountable wailing wall. Even the fangirl's sister Gel on the human side was stunned, exclaiming, "Is that even possible?" As for Gyril, the Valkyria behind Leonidas, she was so excited her face was contorted. This sister, who usually seemed so calm, only revealed her inner madness on the battlefield. It seemed her pairing with the Spartan king was indeed a perfect match. But Apollo was a god. After all, he wouldn't go down that easily. Our god staggered to his feet, his face already covered in blood. His exquisite avatar, which usually looked like it had 10 layers of filters, was now swollen like a pig's head. But the first thing he said when he stood up nearly made Leonidas freeze. Logically speaking, a sun god beaten to this state should either be furious or ashamed. But what about Apollo? This guy wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and flashed a mysterious smile, saying to Leonidas, "That last attack was truly beautiful." Leonidas' face was a mask of confusion. "Did I knock your brain loose? You got beaten into this sorry state, and you still think it's beautiful?" Apollo retorted with a serious face, "What the hell do you know? Powerless rage is what's ugly. But right now, to defeat you, I'm burning my soul and giving it my all. Even with a face full of blood, this is the most beautiful existence in the world." Well said. This friend's narcissism had broken through physical defenses and ascended to a philosophical level. It turned out that in Apollo's eyes, beauty wasn't about a pretty appearance, but the process of knowing one's own shortcomings and desperately burning for it. To understand this guy's strange train of thought, a flashback to Apollo's apotheosis must be inserted here. Everyone knows about the Temple of Delphi in Greece, inscribed with the famous saying, "Know thyself." Many people thought the god was being pretentious, meaning mortals should know their place and not compare themselves to gods. But in reality, this was a reminder from Apollo to himself. Long ago, there was a giant serpent named Python who wreaked havoc in the mortal world. The war god Ars sent a bunch of his underlings to their deaths, but they all ended up as snacks for Python. At this moment, Apollo appeared, shining, and one-shotted Python. According to the script, once the beast is defeated, it's supposed to stay dead. But this Python was also an eccentric. It wasn't satisfied. The next day, it came back to life and offered itself up for another beating. The third day, it came again. Every time, it was pinned to the ground and beaten by Apollo, but it just wouldn't give up. Apollo was also puzzled. "Brother, what the hell do you want? Coming to challenge me day after day. Being a monster must be a leisurely job." Python cried and wailed, "I hate this life. I was born a monster, and wherever I go, people hate me. And what about you? You're the sun god, born high and mighty, knowing everything. Everyone has to kneel and worship you. Why do I have to be in the mud while you're in the clouds? I refuse to accept my fate. I want to beat you just once." These words struck a chord with Apollo. He looked at the ugly monster before him and saw the brightest light. Apollo laughed and told Python, "You think I was born this strong? Wrong, so wrong." It turned out that although Apollo was a god when he was born, he also started from zero. Music, archery, medicine, prophecy, all of that was the result of his day and night grinding. The reason he was an almighty god was not because of his talent, but because he was the grinding king of the divine realm. Know thyself meant knowing your own shortcomings and then overcoming them, Apollo told Python. "You know you are weak and small, yet you still want to challenge the impossible. This pathetic appearance is truly explosively beautiful." And so, two who were once mortal enemies became the closest of friends. The flashback ends. Returning to the arena, Apollo now looked at the Leonidas before him with changed eyes. It was no longer the contempt of looking at an ant, but the enthusiasm of looking at a kindred spirit. He admitted it. Leonidas was also a ruthless man who knew himself and burned his soul. "Since we are the same kind, let's not play any more fancy tricks." Apollo took a deep breath, and the ore around him exploded in an instant. "Let's burn together until we turn to ashes." Only to see the air behind Apollo begin to twist. A giant statue of a goddess, radiating a gloomy fluorescence, appeared, hovering. It was the statue of the moon goddess Artemis. The audience in the divine realm was terrified. Even old man Zeus had to sit up straight. This kid actually brought that thing out. This is a weapon of mass destruction that no one can stop if I don't call a halt. In Apollo's hands, the gloves of light he had used for defense disappeared, replaced by a giant bow of light. This bow wasn't for shooting sculptures. It was for shooting people like targets. Apollo drew the bowstring. There was no physical arrow, because light itself was his arrow. Take this, mortal. This is a greeting from the sun, without any warning, without any flight trajectory. The moment Apollo released his hand, a bloody hole exploded on Leonidas' shoulder. His whole body was thrown back by the enormous impact. Too fast, so fast that even a seasoned warrior like Leonidas couldn't see how the arrow flew. The Valkyria beside him frantically screamed, "That's the speed of light. How can a human dodge the speed of light?" That's right, this was Apollo's ultimate technique, the Godspeed Light Arrows. The moment he released his hand, the arrow had already hit its target. This was basically a cheat that broke the law of causality. Shoot and it hits. How could you fight this? Then Leonidas gritted his teeth, clutching the bloody hole on his shoulder. The reaction speed he had been proud of was like slow motion in the face of the speed of light. But that wasn't all. Apollo had no intention of stopping. He was like a marksman who had activated infinite firepower mode. The bow of light in his hands fired wildly like a Gatling gun. In an instant, Leonidas was submerged in a rain of light. Left arm, thigh, chest, bloody flowers bloomed all over his body. He raised his shield, wanting to block, but the arrows were too fast, too bright, fundamentally impossible to defend against. The unbreakable Spartan king, at this moment, was like a piece of meat on a chopping block, mercilessly sliced by divine power. The walls of the arena were also shot into a honeycomb. The entire audience was dead silent. Only the sound of flesh being pierced echoed. Heimdall in the stands, acting as commentator, said, "This is the fastest attack in the world. Besides me, no one can react in time. That Spartan guy is really done for this time." The dust settled. Leonidas, covered in blood, stood there, swaying, about to fall. His body had been pierced with several transparent holes. Just looking at it was painful. If it were anyone else, they would have been lying on the ground waiting for an ambulance long ago. But who was he? He was the King of Sparta. Apollo stopped, looking at the still-standing Leonidas. His eyes filled with respect. To withstand so many arrows of light and still not fall. Your body and spirit are truly both beautiful. Leonidas spat out a mouthful of blood and grinned. That smile was scarier than a demon. Beautiful, beautiful, stop making me sick. It's just a few toothpicks stuck in me. Is that all you've got? Tough, truly tough. Even though his body was covered in 1,000 wounds, his will was still made of iron. But reality was cruel. The Valkyria beside him was about to cry. "No way, King. That's the speed of light. We have no power to fight back at all. If this continues, you'll die." But Leonidas paid her no mind. He gripped the shield in his hand tightly, his eyes fixed on Apollo. He was thinking, in this desperate storm of light speed, searching for the single chance of victory. But Apollo drew his bow again. This time, the light was even more dazzling than before. It was clear he intended to send Leonidas on his way with one shot. A crazy glint suddenly flashed in Leonidas' eyes. The speed of light is indeed undodgeable. But what if, at the very moment he shoots, I read him? Just when everyone thought this round was over, a miracle happened. Facing the arrow of light rushing towards him again, Leonidas actually blocked it with his shield. That's right, he tanked it and countered. The jaws of the entire audience dropped to the floor. That's the speed of light. How could he see it? Did this old man activate the Sharingan? Actually, this was purely a warrior's instinct. The number of people Leonidas had cut down on the battlefield in his life was more than the amount of rice Apollo had ever eaten. That kind of intuition for danger had long been carved into his very bones. It wasn't seeing at all, but purely based on feeling. The moment the killing intent exploded, he raised his shield. This is called, as long as I can predict your prediction. Even the speed of light has to break for me. This counterattack successfully injured Apollo. Not only did it cut a large gash on Apollo's arm, but it also pierced through his chest. Apollo fell to the ground on the spot. But just as the gods despaired, Apollo struggled to his feet again. At this time, Apollo looked at the bloody, but still unfallen Leonidas, and his gaze changed. He asked the question that had troubled him for so long. You've been beaten into a honeycomb. What the hell are you fighting for? Is it for revenge, or for humanity? Leonidas spat out a mouthful of blood and laughed with great pride. Revenge? Humanity? What the hell do those grand reasons have to do with me? I'm standing here now for no other reason than this is when I should be fighting. My life and death, my will, are decided by me alone. This is us selfish bastards. This is Sparta. Listen, this is class. For all humanity? Too tiring. For myself? That's what's truly badass. These words not only made the Spartan men in the stands blood boil, but even Apollo couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Well said. For myself, I just like this shameless. No, this individualistic personality of yours. Since the cards are on the table, let's not dawdle. One move to decide victory or defeat. Apollo didn't play any more fancy light sword tricks either. He wanted to turn himself into the final arrow, using a physical collision to give his opponent the highest respect. Leonidas also threw away all the flashy weapons in his hands, keeping only a shield. What is the core of Spartan tactics? Not defense, but offense. It's using the shield like a bulldozer to crush the enemy. The two rush towards each other at the same time. Like two meteors colliding in the middle of the arena, accompanied by a loud explosion, light engulfed everything. When the dust settled, the two still held their confrontational poses. Leonidas' shield had shattered. Apollo's fists were also a bloody mess, but they had pierced through Leonidas' body. In the end, it was Apollo who fought to the end. Leonidas, though defeated. His punch had landed a solid blow on Apollo's handsome face, leaving the sun god with a permanent memento. Well done, Spartan. Apollo looked at his fallen opponent. His eyes held no joy of victory, only respect for the strong. Your battle scar back is truly beautiful. The 9th round, Apollo wins. The score is now 5-4. The gods are once again in the lead.